Today, we're going to show you how to make a strong all-epoxy miter like this. And we're going to teach you a few of the things we learned along the way.
So for this table, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pouring a clear epoxy with a bit of pigment in it, probably liquid black, to give it like that smoky color. So we marked out the lines, and now we're going to do the cut. Cleaning up all the bark and all the voids here of all the dirt, debris, and anything else that may be caught up in there. And then we'll be able to finalize our layout, and then we'll be able to put it in the form.
You may be wondering why we're adding black pigment to the epoxy, and the main reason is that in time, clear epoxies will typically go a little bit yellow, and this black tint will help battle some of that yellow. So it'll always just be like a touch darker than clear, but still see-through. You still get all the details, but it will help eliminate that yellowing down the road. We've got our piece on the CNC, and what we're gonna do with this piece is cut it up the middle so that we can do a test miter. Now, we haven't mitered all epoxy before, so we wanna make sure we get the process right and make sure it looks good and we're comfortable before we start cutting our actual piece. When gluing up an epoxy miter, you don't wanna sand and polish that mitered edge because you want the epoxy to have something to adhere to when you're doing that miter. All right, so our test piece has all cured up. We've got our epoxy holding these two pieces together. We're gonna peel the tape off, have a look, see how the miter looks, see if we've got our process down before we do it on our larger piece. So yeah, let's get this tape peeled off. I think it looks pretty good. The miter's pretty tight. You can't see any imperfections. You can see it better on the inside here, where we've got the epoxy that kind of made the panels a little more clear. You can't really see any imperfections in there. So I think this worked. Next up, we should test for some strength to see how sturdy this guy is. But I think we're ready to work on our bigger panels. But yeah, let's see how strong this is. We'll see if we can break this. Strong. See if you can break this guy. Hey Connor, see if you can break that. Hey Paul, let's see if you can break this. Nope. Nothing. You can see here that the actual seam, which is right there, is one, very clear, and two, it didn't break at all. It's the epoxy panels that actually fractured and broke. So I think we're safe to work on the full piece. A common question we get all the time is how to machine epoxy, and can you sand it, can you drill into it? And epoxy machines, just like wood for the most part, you can sand it, you can CNC it, you can send it through the planer, you can drill into it. So, you know, just treat the epoxy like the wood when you're machining it. Sometimes there's a bit more mess to clean up, but it's very similar to wood. Now that we've got the mitres cut and we've sanded the inside of each panel, or the underside once the table's complete, up to 180, we're ready to do our glue up. Now, one thing that's a little different with this glue up is, you know, we've got wood and epoxy, so it's not your typical glue up where you're using, say, dominoes, wood, and wood glue. So we're gonna use tape and epoxy to glue up this entire thing. So what you're gonna see is each of these panels getting taped into position, and then we're gonna fill the void with epoxy. And one thing to note when making the mitres is you wanna pick it in a spot where your slabs and epoxy are fairly straight. If you have really curvy and funky pieces there, it's really hard to get a nice clean mitre where it looks like a proper waterfall, where the top slabs kind of just fall off into the leg. Whenever we do an epoxy mitre like this, we always use West Systems because it doesn't cure too slow or too fast, and it's the right thickness. You know, you're gonna wanna use some extra epoxy and make sure that all those gaps and voids from your mitred edges are filled to create a proper bond. No air gaps, you know, you don't want any weakness in there, so the more epoxy the better. It'll lose out the mitre, and then you just wipe it clean after. For a mitred glue up like this, we always use tape. It's a perfect way to kind of contain the epoxy in the mitre, but we also use it once we're squared up to just run a couple bands to hold the legs at 90. Okay guys, it's time to remove all the tape and then trim this leg down so it matches up with this leg. We gotta make sure those are the same height. And then it's time to just start sanding and polishing and adding an edge detail and getting this piece finished up today. Okay, we're done sanding, and before we polish this up, we just want to test the strength and see how strong it actually is to make sure we don't waste our time, you know, polishing and going through all those steps. And as you can see, it's pretty solid. There's a little bit of flex in it just because it's a little bit thinner, but the epoxy joints are super strong. You can even see like body weight on there, and it's holding. Just basically two people are gonna sit on it. Oh. Pretty good. Solid. I'm not dancing. Thanks for watching. Let us know if you guys thought this would hold up or if you thought it was gonna fail when we stood it up on its end. And if you got any value from this video, subscribe, like, leave us a comment. We're always looking for support so we can grow this page. Thanks.